Hi, my name is Sara Arnold. I am Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Gibbes Museum of Art in Charleston. It is my pleasure to provide this virtual introduction to the exhibition Central to Their Lives, Southern Women Artists in the Johnson Collection, that's now on view at the Richardson Family Art Museum and Gallery there at Wofford College. The exhibition is organized by the Johnson Collection, which is based in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And it offers us a glimpse of a diverse group of pioneering women artists who contributed significantly to the history of art in the South. Through the lens of the Johnson Collection, this exhibition is able to shed light on the numerous achievements and accomplishments of women artists, as well as the challenges that female artists faced during the first half of the 20th century. There are 40 works in the exhibition that is accompanied by a comprehensive catalog. It features 6 scholarly essays that explore topics ranging from art history's gendered color line to the relationship between art and social activism around the women's suffrage movement to the role of the modernist era. It also contains a robust dictionary of women artists who were working in the South between the 1880s and 1960. Many of these artists had been previously under-recognized in the art historical canon, and we can now celebrate their contributions to the visual history of American art. The title of the exhibition refers to a statement that was made by modernist painter Nell Blaine, who, when reflecting back on her career, once said, quote, "Art is my life. Not being able to make or see art would be a major deprivation." It was this passion and dedication to art that drove many of these women to push boundaries and to make sacrifices for their careers. Blaine, like many of the artists who are represented in this show, overcame obstacles to make art central to their lives, whether they were educational or racial barriers, or in Blaine's case, significant physical handicaps. All of these women were challenging traditional social norms and really entering into what had for centuries been a man's world. The works on view in the galleries demonstrate that these women embraced an array of styles and media. Their backgrounds reflect a range of socioeconomic classes and educational experiences. As the catalog aptly notes, the Johnson Collection has cast an inclusive net in defining Southern women artists. Many were born and raised in the South and left for greater opportunities both in the North as well as abroad. Others moved to the South from elsewhere and made this region their home. You will find in this collection artists who are both trained and self-taught, professionals as well as amateurs who never sold their works during their lifetime. The Johnson Collection has sought out works to represent artists with connections to each of the southern states, from Virginia to Louisiana. These are not the first women in the South to practice art professionally. As early as 1708, we can document women such as Henrietta Johnson, who arrived in the new colony of South Carolina with her husband, and we know that she was helping to support her family through portrait painting. These women are, though, among the first generations of women who were allowed to attend formal art schools with their male counterparts, and who were able to become teachers and then influence and inspire the next generations of women. Virginia artist Teresa Pollock's 1931 oil painting, which is entitled Art Studio, graces the cover of the exhibition catalog. Pollock was a native of Richmond. She studied at the Art Students League in New York, and in 1932, her work was selected for the first biennial exhibition of contemporary American painting at the Whitney Museum. Pollock was awarded a Carnegie Fellowship to study at Harvard University, and she then returned to her native state. There, Pollock became a painting instructor at Virginia Commonwealth University, and over the next few decades, she helped to build what would become one of the country's most prominent art departments. Pollock's studio was actually a very common subject in her paintings, and in the example that you see displayed in the galleries, she presents a small corner of the room. It is sunlit, it's comfortably furnished. It's a cozy interior space that suggests a creative haven for the study and production of art. There's an easel at the far left and a small maquette of a female torso that's sitting in the windowsill. There are stacks of books and strewn newspaper over a chair, all of which indicate that the space is lived in. We see through the window Pollock's urban view that overlooks the rooftops of downtown Richmond. Ultimately, this artist is giving us an intimate snapshot of her work environment, and I think this really sets a nice stage for this focus on women artists in the exhibition. An entirely different sort of workspace is presented in Winona Day Bell's canvas that's entitled Peach Packing. This was painted in 1938, and Bell pictures the factory floor of a South Carolina peach packing plant. You'll see immersed between a system of mechanical pulleys and chutes, there is a cadre of women who are dressed in colorful frocks. They are seen diligently sorting and packing the fresh produce. Like Pollock, Bell was able to take advantage of the education opportunities that had finally opened up to women in the 20th century. She attended the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and she also studied at Hans Hofmann's School of Art on the island of Capri. While she was raised in both South Carolina and Georgia, she spent most of her career in New York, where she taught at the Parsons School of Design. But the South remained a frequent subject of her work, and she captured it both in landscapes as well as vignettes like this one of architectural scenes that were associated with her native states. In addition to their pursuit of education, many of these artists were simultaneously active in the women's suffrage movement. Native Alabaman Anne Goldthwait was a lifelong advocate for women's rights. She is known for her portraits of fellow women artists, as well as other women who were making a name for themselves during the suffrage movement. Goldthwait's parents died when she was quite young, and she was left in the care of relatives who supported her desire to study art, which was unusual during this time period. She moved to New York in 1898 and was in Paris by 1906, where she met Gertrude Stein, who in turn introduced her to painters such as Henri Matisse and Pablo Picasso. Goldthwait returned to New York, where she became involved in the women's suffrage movement there. She was one of very few women whose work was represented in the 1913 Armory Show, and she went on to work as an instructor at the Art Students League for 23 years. She spent her summers still in her home state of Alabama, where she painted this portrait of fellow artist Francis Nix. Nix later became the director of the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. The painting demonstrates Goldthwait's characteristic portrait style, showing her use of a limited color palette, as well as her fluid painterly brushstrokes. Goldthwait is one of several artists that's featured in the exhibition that was known for her portraiture. The portrait of A Young Man Peeling Fruit by Georgia artist Augusta Olszczyk also stands out in this collection, for its sensitivity to color, as well as this very delicate portrayal of the subject. Instead of traveling to Europe for training, Olsztyn studied in Mexico with painter and muralist Diego Rivera. She was inspired by the political and social commentary that is often associated with Mexican muralist work. And when she returned to the American South, she often created works that critiqued the region's racial inequities. In 1948, she proposed a mural of her own for a Savannah high school, and it was intended to document the history of Georgia. However, her progressive design was rejected for its imagery of the mistreatment of African Americans. Though it wasn't until late in her career, Olsztyn is one of several artists that's in the exhibition who evolved from realism to abstraction. Alma Thomas was born in Georgia, but moved to Washington, D.C. in the first decade of the 20th century, along with her parents and 3 sisters, in order to escape the racial violence that plagued her birthplace. Thomas attended Howard University and became the first graduate of the art program there. With a teaching certificate in hand, she taught in the D.C. public schools for nearly 40 years, but she continued to work. Her early artwork was representational, and we see from the example in the exhibition that's titled Still Life with Mandolin, her experimentation with the post-impressionist styles. But later she developed her signature abstract style that features intensely colored pattern brushstrokes. Thomas was associated with the Washington Color School, which was a loosely affiliated group of artists that were concerned with the use of color specifically. In 1972, Thomas was honored as the first African American woman to have a one-person exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art. The field of sculpture was still largely off limits to women in the early 20th century. It was considered too physically demanding, and particularly in the American South, it was improper, too masculine of a medium for women to tackle. Nevertheless, there are several women who are represented in the exhibition that broke through these traditional barriers, and the show includes works by naturalist Anna Hyatt Huntington and the revered Harlem Renaissance sculptor Augusta Savage, who not only battled gender discrimination, but also racial discrimination throughout her career. The show also features a striking work by perhaps a lesser-known African-American artist, Selma Burke. Burke's wood-carved figure that's titled Woman Holding Sheaf of Wheat is reminiscent of the African artwork that she was surrounded by in her home growing up in North Carolina. Burke was initially educated as a nurse, but eventually she earned a scholarship to Columbia University, where she earned her master's degree in art. And Burke's best known work can probably be found in most people's pockets. Her sculpture relief of Franklin Roosevelt is the one featured on the dime. For many artists featured in this collection, depicting the uniqueness of their southern surroundings was of great significance to their careers, and this was certainly true for the artist based here in South Carolina. Charleston watercolor specialist Alice Ravenel U.G. Smith found her inspiration in the low-country marshes, along the beaches and the coastline, as well as in the cypress forests that surrounded her hometown. Her unique style that is exemplified in the night scene that's included in the exhibition, entitled Along the Beach, was largely influenced by her personal studies of Asian art. including access that she had to a large collection of Japanese woodblock prints that were owned by her cousin, Ma Alston Reed. Smith had limited formal training, and she rarely traveled outside of South Carolina, but her work was exhibited in New York, Boston, and Chicago during her lifetime. She gained knowledge from many artists and patrons who congregated in Charleston, which was a veritable art colony during the period between the two world wars. And she successfully supported herself throughout her life through her art. Self-taught artists Clementine Hunter of Louisiana and Minnie Evans of North Carolina both took up painting for the first time at middle age, really. Hunter spent nearly half her life working as a field laborer, as well as a domestic servant. She was over 50 before she created her first painting. And from that point on, she painted prolifically, creating more than 5,000 works during her lifetime that ended at the age of 101. Her works record her impressions of everyday life and the labor that took place in her community on Melrose Plantation, where she both worked and lived. Minnie Evans, on the other hand, began painting at age 43. Her fantastical multimedia drawings, such as the one shown in the exhibition, are kaleidoscopic scenes with intricate flowers, leaves, and distorted faces that are usually drawn in both pencil and crayon. For Evans, these mysterious images were based on dreams, and they were closely tied to her religious faith. So whether producing landscapes, portraits, still lifes, genre paintings, or sculpture, all of which are presented here and central to their lives, these women artists, as well as many others, challenged the status quo of their era. They created new space in the art world for future generations. This project by the Johnson Collection to highlight their work and achievements is intended to recognize, not marginalize, their efforts. Ultimately, as artist Anne Goldthwait once said, these women want an audience that asks simply, is it good? Not, was it done by a woman? Thank you.